And so it's something that happens even early on, and we really want to get ahead of it, which is why our program, focuses on getting kids engaged in school, really from kindergarten all the way through their senior year.
Welcome to a podcast with interesting people. I'm Adrian Sinclair, and this is the Adrian Sinclair Show. And today my guest is Auburn Harrison from CIS, which is Communities in Schools of Nevada, of Western Nevada, and she's the executive director over there. She's also a TED speaker, and we're going to be talking about what her organization is doing in this space. So welcome to the show, Auburn. Really thankful that you're doing this conversation, because I wanted to learn more about what you guys are doing and sharing all that good stuff that CIS is doing. And so first off, love to learn about the organization, but welcome on the show.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So Communities in Schools is actually a national organization based out of Washington, D.C., and there are affiliates all over the country that all have the very same mission. So here in Western Nevada, we're actually part of a dropout mission program. So what we do at Communities in Schools is we hire full-time site coordinators. They're oftentimes social workers or case managers with a history in human services. And we set up full-time resource room at public schools that are the most high poverty, dropout prone schools in our district. And then begin to surround students with a community of support to empower them to make sure that they do stay in school and achieve in life. So our overall goal is dropout prevention, increasing graduation rates, and turning out adults that are, ready to really soar in the world, get good jobs, and follow their dreams and goals. So that's essentially what we do full time, although, as you know, we are in the middle of a global pandemic and things have changed significantly for our organization.
Right.
But our mission stays the same.
And the programs that you guys are doing over there, like what kind of programs are you running to, and what are they aimed at?
Sure. So we have goals that we are always trying to meet for our students. And so we have what we in the past have called our ABC goals. And so those are academics, which are grades, of course, behavior goals, and then, not academics, attendance goals, behavior goals, and coursework, which are academics. So those are our ABC goals. We now have an additional goal, which is an S goal, which is social emotional learning. And so we're always looking at ways to make sure that students are not only attending school, but that they're increasing their grades, that they're engaged, that they feel connected to school and they feel safe at school, and they have somebody at school that they can count on. So that's where our staff comes in. I typically hire young men and women who, somehow they have gained in their life experience a passion for helping students, whether they themselves were an at-risk youth, or maybe they didn't have as much support at home and they want to give back, whether they might have been a former teacher. We have former military members. It's a wide variety, but somebody with a passion for helping students. And then they're really assigned to a group of students that they case manage, and they check in with every day, every week, every month, depending on the needs of the student, just to make sure that they're on track and have everything that they need on campus to be successful.
How did this organization begin?
So it started in the 70s in New York City, actually. And a man named Bill Milliken started it. And he always said it's relationships that change people, not programs. And so that's kind of where it came from. And it's evolved. The organization has been around over 40 years now. Here in Washoe County, this is our 7th school year in the Washoe County School District. Our Las Vegas office has been around about twice as long as that. So we're constantly expanding, building deeper relationships in the schools, and finding new schools that need our services.
And how does this organization sustain itself in terms of financials and making this as a viable organization that can continue this mission?
Absolutely, that's one of the main points of my job is fundraising, making sure that our organization has all the resources that we need, not only to pay our case managers, but also to provide essential resources and services to the schools. So what we do, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. So we have a very mixed bag of funding sources. We write grants to local and federal foundations, or local organizations and foundations. We also get some federal money in the form of Title I funds. Those are special funds given to school districts in order to help them turn things around and have greater academic success. So we get some of those funds, and then we get some state funds from the Department of Education. But the bulk of our money is through fundraising. So we write grants, I hold fundraisers, do campaigns, outreach.
Writing grants.
I like it. I like fundraising, believe it or not. I never thought I'd say that, and I accidentally got into this position. It was never something I used to do. I never used to like selling candy bars or anything like that, but I love it because the work that's on the ground can't happen without it. And so, when I'm holding a party with the sole goal of asking people to give money, a lot of people cringe at that, but I love it because I believe in the mission. And I think, when somebody gives me a gift of $1,000 and they truly, that's where they wanted their money to go. I mean, that's such a powerful thing.
Right. So what's the secret? What's the secret? What's the secret sauce then? Is it just the belief in the mission, what you do, that makes it not as you feel like you really are not selling. You're almost providing an opportunity for someone to help.
Yeah, I mean, you have to talk to everybody differently. Everybody gives in different ways. I try to think about myself, and if I give somebody a gift, how do I want to be treated? I want to be thanked. I want to be acknowledged. And so I look at that way with our donors. So it's about establishing a relationship. I'm going to give my mom a shout out. When I was a kid, she didn't allow my sister and I to play with our Christmas gifts or our birthday gifts until we wrote a thank you note. If we got something from grandma, we had to write a thank you note. And so I've always been very punctual with my thank you notes, and it's led me to where I am. I feel like if a donor has to ask me about that check, if they got it, if I got the check, or where did their money go, then I haven't done my job. They should already know. I should have already given them a photo of the beautiful thing that they helped build and told them a story about the success of our students. So if fundraising is not that big of a deal for you in terms of, at least in terms of like making it happen, what are some of the other challenges that you have as an organization? Well, don't get me wrong, fundraising is still a challenge. I can't say that it's easy.
If you're listening to this podcast and you want to donate, just visit the website, and you can find what is it, cisnevada.org, right?
That's right, cisnevada.org. Yeah, we are always looking for funds. I don't want to say we're doing great. There are many, many challenges. I think right now the biggest challenge is whether or not we're going to be in school full-time in person, or if we're going to be doing a virtual model that's going to be really impacting how we work. But every person across the whole world is experiencing that right now. So we're certainly not alone. The hardest part of my job, hands down, is managing people. I manage people who go into schools every day and witness trauma among their students. My site coordinators probably often feel like they can never do enough, and no matter what they do, it's never enough to help the students that are in need. And so there's some of that at play. It's a hard time right now economically. So there's those challenges of course, true, wanting to keep people employed, making sure that we do fundraise and we do the right outreach. But also, more importantly, that we just lead with our hearts and have trust in our own intuition. So I've worked on that, a lot as a leader, but I'm getting there. It's always during this pandemic, especially, just stopping and thinking about, whoa, I'm a human too. How am I doing? And then taking that same, approach with the people that I serve. So I think it all kind of comes to the top and then trickles down.
So let's talk about that a little bit. I wanted to ask you before we kind of segue into talking about you, because I want to share I want you to share your story. What kind of as an organization, who do you partner with? Who can be beneficial to you to help you? Even those who are already partners with you, and who would be your dream partners to kind of help the mission?
Yeah, our dream partners right now would be any organization that can provide really crucial, either on campus or mental health services. we have known and discovered during this time, and really even prior to COVID-19, mental health services there aren't enough of them for the need among our students. We have students who are suicidal. We have students who are severely depressed, anxious, and they may not have parents who either have the resources or the insurance to get them that help that they need, or they may have fear. There could be some fear based on the documentation status of the family or the parents. There could be fear based on what it means to have a mental illness. So,
right.
All things that, kind of get in the way. So if we had partners that were able to provide those services, and we had like a full-time mental health caseworkers on our team, I mean, that would be ideal.
Well, nowadays, with telemedicine and teleservices, so to speak, that may be easier than ever, because then you could essentially, through this message, share, reaching out to people, you could potentially have mental health counselors and therapists who could provide some of that pro bono, or even remotely, and that's something that would be, I think, beneficial.
Absolutely. We're always trying to, as an organization, find other organizations that already do what they do really well. So we try to be a broker of services for the schools. The schools need things like food and clothing and shelter. They need those items and the resources and the connection for students, but teachers aren't really, equipped or meant to be social workers. They're meant to be teaching academics. And so if we can kind of take that hard part out of their hands and give them support there, then they can focus on the academic side.
Right.
So that's always a big goal of ours.
In terms of, I guess, what about like corporate sponsors, I guess, would be helpful too, even in terms of like operations, right? So partners who could, well, the easy, I think, money for them is just to donate, but maybe other partners that could help with the tools that you guys need from corporations. So hopefully whoever's listening to this and passing it along to anybody else, if you got connections with big corporations who want to provide and sponsor things and help out worthwhile missions like CIS, reach out to Auburn. So now let's talk about you, Auburn Harrison. How did you get into this? How did you get into this? What is some of your background? How did you land at CIS and what you're doing over there?
Sure. So it was an accident, I like to say. I never, as a child, said I wanted to work for a nonprofit and be an executive director. But I actually wanted to be a writer since I was a little girl. And I actually joined the military, the Navy, when I was 19 as a Navy journalist. And so that was kind of my first job as an adult. And I did 5 years as a Navy journalist, traveling around and telling the story of the U.S. Navy and the military. And when I got out, one of my second job in a commercial broadcast world was here in Reno, where I moved to work for a television station. I fell in love with Reno. I fell in love with the community, but I slowly fell out of love with TV journalism because I had so much time in this community to cover all the stories of all the beautiful things, all the beautiful nonprofit work happening, that I felt jealous. I felt like, wait a minute, that is amazing. These people are building homes, or they're building homeless shelters. They're doing all this incredible art or whatever the nonprofit was doing. And I thought, I want to do that. I want to be on the inside helping the community rather than just telling the story. Right. And so truthfully, the way I got my foot in the door is I decided I was going to go volunteer at a soup kitchen, and a year and a half later, I was the development director at a local Catholic charities organization. So I just kind of was in the right place at the right time and found a love for fundraising, and then worked my way up. I knew I wanted to work as an executive director at some point of a nonprofit that I truly believed in, find the one that I felt like the mission spoke to me. Right. And that was inequalities in schools. And so here I am.
Is it what influenced you to become part of that organization? Was it something that you sought out and you approached them, or was it something that just, things kind of planets aligned and it was just the right opportunity at the right time?
It was truly just the right opportunity at the right time. I had heard that there was an opening, and I had been looking at a couple of other nonprofits that I was interested in potentially leading. I knew I wanted to be a small local nonprofit, and I knew I wanted it to be something where I could feel like it was long-term help. And so when I saw this, I applied, and they were just really looking for somebody with some kind of ties and some love for the community that wanted to build something from the ground up. And so I applied and felt like an imposter my first couple of years, and I'm figuring it out. I've been here 4 years, and I pinch myself every day. I feel really lucky to have this job. It doesn't feel like a job, it's like a hobby.
Having the imposter syndrome is something that I think is prevalent. It's in almost any field. And I hear these stories from a lot of people where you just go in and it's like, I can't believe I'm doing this job, and it's like, am I qualified? Like you start doubting yourself maybe. But then I think as long as you kind of have like your eyes on the vision and the goal and the mission, and you do the best you can do, everything else is just going to come in. We just have experiences. We fail. We hopefully learn from that, and we pick ourselves up and continue pressing forward, right? With the sort of like the anchor being the vision and the mission of what you're supposed to do, and that's hopefully is guiding you. You mentioned some of the challenges of being an executive director. Share some of your other challenges as, dealing with people and making sure that everyone is taken care of, and then just kind of managing everything. What are the challenges are you facing of there at CIS that maybe things that you haven't even considered that would be like a challenge?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I feel like right now, if you blink, there's new information and there's new things coming out, new needs that the schools have. I just placed an order for thermometers for my staff to make sure that they can self-check every day before they come into work in the fall, whether they're working in schools or not. I mean, that's not something I ever anticipated needing to do. We're working on stockpiling, of course, PPE and masks. Right now, trying to figure out how we're going to make up, thousands of dollars in potential revenue loss from casino revenue. Casino revenue actually funds education in our state, and right. We've had our casinos and restaurants closed for many months, and so there's some financial impacts that we have to look at. So it really runs the gamut. I also I have the pleasure of working directly with high school and middle school and elementary school principals. Mm-hmm. Those are truly the busiest people I've ever met in my whole life. I don't know how they do it. They're responsible for a lot, and they're really busy people. So just trying to keep up with them and make them happy and really, create deep relationships with them is a challenge in itself, but one that I do enjoy.
With the it's de rigueur right now to talk about COVID because that's what's impacting us so much. With the current COVID pandemic, how does that affect? What are you like? I'm looking for an insight from you and what you see in terms of like kids and students and mental health. It's if there's anything that COVID brought in is it kind of highlighted how important mental health is in general, like just for everyone. We take care of our bodies. We hopefully work out. We're staying active. We're hopefully eating right. But, this thing between our ears over here often gets neglected in a mental health aspect. What do you see in that space happening right now?
Yeah, huge impacts on students, on families, on teachers, principals, mental health workers. I think all of us have been impacted. When I heard stories of students who 3-4 months into the pandemic were saying that they hadn't had a fresh breath of air in months, that's where I knew the severity. I think those of us who are fortunate and have maybe a backyard or a home where we can spread out a bit, we don't think about the students that we serve that work in or live inside of maybe a weekly motel with 2 or 3 families, and they don't have anywhere to spread out. They might witness some difficult things every day that aren't appropriate for kids to witness because of where they live. Right. And might not be getting out much. So I think it's impacted those students to a deep level. I think there's a lot of, we definitely, there were many more, child protective services calls taking place during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So
my wife mentioned
really
that there was a rise of, my wife being in mental health therapy space domain services. She mentioned that there is a increase of domestic violence cases and things like that. I guess people need to get out and they need to have their lives outside of home, and otherwise they stress out. Obviously, this is compounded by all the economic stress, which is impacting people, right? Losing jobs, small businesses closing down, and everything just kind of affecting people, how they, the whole social distancing highly impacting people. What is your organization doing, if anything, in the middle of this pandemic?
Right. I mean, really from day one, when schools were shut down, we pivoted as an organization to being an on campus to really a drive-by home delivery case management service. And so we instantly, the students that my staff was already connected to, they began delivering social emotional learning items, school supplies, hygiene products. Toilet paper was a huge one early on in the pandemic. Nobody could find toilet paper, and so we were trying to order it bulk, and even if we could just give families a couple of rolls to get them by, anything like that in the beginning. And then we really we did a needs assessment on how students were, and when we realized the mental health was kind of the largest thing, we began to just focus on, how do we connect to students? Can we go on Zoom and do a baking lesson and drop off a cake mix? Can we do that? We can do that. And so we started doing things like that. Can we go outside and socially distance with masks on and meet with a student and see how they're doing? Yes, we can do that. And so my team was extremely creative and nimble and found out ways to be able to connect to students anyway. And so we kind of made deeper relationships that I think are going to carry out when school does resume again.
Yeah. With the mental health being so high up in terms of, I guess the pendulum is kind of swinging back right now, where people are realizing more and more how important mental health is. Incorporating that into what you guys are doing, making sure that people are taking care of that in that respect, and building that awareness as well is such a huge component and key for people to understand. And I think, not for nothing, I mean, COVID and Corona has impacted, the whole planet. But if there's anything good that comes out of this, is I think people really seeing how important it is to take care of themselves. And, working with what you guys are doing and your mission, let's talk about a little bit about CIA's mission and, how do you guys, let's first define, because on your website, you guys are talking about at-risk students. Let's just kind of define what that means. If you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and that's kind of a term that is starting to be really outdated. A lot of people don't like the term at risk anymore. And so people like to say things like at opportunity instead, students with opportunities. And so, however you like to call it, the way we define that would be oftentimes the schools we serve have really high rates of free and reduced lunch. So students that qualify for federal free and reduced lunch rates, students who are in underrepresented minority populations, LGBTQ students, students who have they might be the first family member at home who's ever had a high school diploma. Those are all factors that, when you look statistically, that kind of stack up against a student. And so those are oftentimes the students we serve. We serve about 88% students of color. And so we're serving students that may have nobody else in their life at home that they rely on for just support and help. Those are the things that we consider at risk.
What are some of the, socioeconomic reasons are huge, probably, in terms of underlying reasons for students to drop out of schools. Any other things that you see nowadays in terms of affect the dropout out of school reasons? Why is it happening outside of just like socioeconomic things? Anything else that are factors right now?
Yeah, school safety, definitely a concern, and bullying and things like that. We also have, childcare and underemployment are huge challenges. We often have students that are in 7th and 8th grade who end up dropping out because they're being asked by adults in their home to watch the younger siblings because the adults have really no choice, and they need to be able to provide food and put a roof over their family's head, and so they have no one to watch the children. So that can happen. At the high school level, unfortunately, we see high schoolers drop out because they need to make money and work full time to help, again, support their families. And so those are two huge reasons. Job loss and economic challenges. Oftentimes, homes where there's only one parent, homes with incarceration or deceased parents. So there's a lot of different factors that can lead to it. But, I think what shocks people the most is that we see students drop out and vanish as young as 3rd, 4th grade. And so it's something that happens even early on, and we really want to get ahead of it, which is why our program, focuses on getting kids engaged in school, really from kindergarten all the way through their senior year.
What about like academic performance and social behavior aspects? What kind of things can be done in that respect? I mean, we hear stories about what's happening in schools, and I guess right now it's kind of like a little bit maybe suppressed, maybe it's still happening, but like, school shootings and all those kinds of things. Obviously, mental health, going back to that, is a huge factor of that. What are your, what is your perspective, or like what is your thoughts on what can be done in that space to help with academic performance, to help with behavioral, social behavioral issues that may be not necessarily neglected by schools, but like at places where more help or more things could be done?
Yeah, I mean, communities in schools addresses those type of things really directly. A lot of times, students who maybe are feeling isolated, the communities in schools resource, they learn quickly that they can go there and they can meet with a young adult that's not a school staff member. They're not there to give them a grade or judge. They're just there to talk. They're there to be a friend. At the younger levels, they can go there. If a child doesn't have their school uniform or it's dirty or something, they know they can go there and get a fresh set of clothes. They might be able to get a toothbrush. They know some of those things. That person is there for the trust. And then that's really kind of the carrot that builds that relationship to make sure that they feel like that's a place that they can always continue to go back to. And it's pretty infectious. Sometimes when one student is receiving that resource, they oftentimes can get their friends kind of on board as well. Like, it's not scary. It's okay to get help. Like, those people are there to help. That's a safe place. It's a safe room. And so those are some of the things that we're definitely doing. We really work with the school. Every school looks so different. Everything that we do, it's based on what that school's needs are. So we do actually have 2 schools within our district that we serve that have had school shootings in the past, I'm going to say 6 years. Shootings, stabbings, and other different violent events. And so we, when those things have happened, we've been there and been part of the support team. We've had schools where students have committed suicide, unfortunately, and again, being there as part of the support team to provide whatever resources, in conjunction and collaboration, of course, with the school counselors and the mental health teams provided by the district. So definitely a big part of our work, not a pleasant part, but a part nonetheless.
Right. What worries you most, like in this environment in which we are right now, whether it's COVID or just in general, seeing what's happening with the schooling system and where we're going with this? What are some of your top worries that you have? And conversely, because for every problem has to be a solution, what are some of the things that you think can be done better?
Yeah, I mean, I would say mental health for sure is the biggest concern. And that's mainly because I've watched, during COVID-19, I had some of our high school principal partners, I watched them literally deteriorate in front of my eyes, and telling me that for the first time in their lives, they were experiencing anxiety attacks and they were experiencing, severe depression. And so when I saw that, I thought, if that's how our high school principals are feeling, just imagine what's going on with our students.
Right.
And so that's the part that concerns me the most, is I think knowing where our students were before and some of the difficult challenges they had in their lives prior, and then knowing that this just, really adds on to that. compounds the problem. It is scary. It feels a little bit like a mountain in front of us. But we're ready. My entire team, they have absolutely no question or doubt in their mind about wanting to get back to this work, wanting to work in schools, and wanting to help students. And so it's a challenge with a solution that really it's all about that one-on-one relationship that my staff has with the students that they case manage. That's the most important thing. That's the bread and butter right there.
I'm always, looking at what's happening in the schools, and especially now with the impact of COVID, and how that's kind of reshaping how things are done. A lot of schools, like now we're sort of like coming back, but then there's the COVID, the pandemic is flaring up in a bunch of things and a bunch of states, and things are being talked about, like maybe schools will have to be shut down again, and then things will have to happen remotely, where people dial in and do remote schooling, which is then impacting everything else down the line, right? The parents, like someone has to stay home, maybe if it's a small child, and all these different things that are happening. It's interesting how we're going to cope, and how we're going to modify our behavior and modify our doings day in and day out, and operations, so to speak. What do you see in schools in Nevada that are doing in like either preparation or just kind of like, what are their worries? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, very similar to across the country. I think every school, every district is doing things a little bit differently. But, I think a lot of the big focus right now is, of course, preparing for, getting personal protective equipment and everything in order to actually go back to school. But I think more importantly, it's based on what are we going to be recovering from? What did students witness? What did they experience during this time that was so difficult for them? And now we need to focus on that recovery before they can be successful in school. And so that's something that we're going to be for sure looking at. I think we're going to learn a lot as we begin talking to them, learning their situation. I mean, we've had students being evicted during this time, students moving, so there's always this constant flux in their lives. And so when we can kind of grasp where they are and then see how we can be of service to them, I think that's going to be really important. One little thing during the thick of COVID, I wrote on my wall in big Sharpie on a wall, like, your 3 priorities. And it was take care of yourself, take care of the site coordinators, take care of the students. And some people would say, oh my gosh, what a jerk. She's put herself first. But I did that because I felt kind of like, if you don't have your oxygen mask on first, you're not breathing.
Yes.
You're not
Thank you for saying. That's the first thing that popped into my head. It's just the same as with the airplane emergency. Like when the oxygen mask drop, like you need to help yourself before you can help someone. Because if not, then both of you will be in a bad place. So that's not selfish at all. I think that just makes sense.
Yeah. It was a good thing to kind of pass down to the site coordinators so they could remember to hold on, let me take care of myself, then my students. Right. And so, we try to focus on the family first. I think, what good would I be as a leader if I asked my staff to sacrifice their own mental health and their own well-being in order to help others? They got to get there first, and then they can help others so much more.
That's not a good strategy if you don't take care of yourself and your staff first, so they can help others. So you have to prioritize that. So I'm happy that you have that. So that was the first one. What was the second and third again?
I forgot. What was your question again? Hold on.
So you had 3 things that you wrote down on the board, right? Sorry, so first, take care of yourself.
Take care of yourself. Take care of your family, and take care of your students. So I told myself, I have to take care of myself, get my oxygen mask on. I have 3 kids. I also have a husband who's a teacher. My kids are not immune to the mental health impacts of this. They were distance learning as well. And so making sure that they were in a good place. I don't want to sacrifice my own children in order to help others. I have to be in a good place so that I can be impactful. I do use my own children and my husband as examples of what's happening. I watched them struggle through distance learning, and I can only imagine what that's like for a student if they're also hungry and also feeling isolated or alone or don't have a parent at home helping them. So it's hard to separate. You have to bring your own life to the workplace, in order to be effective oftentimes. So I did, for sure.
Speaking of your own personal life, what are some of the things that you draw strength out of your own life and your life experience that you bring in, especially with the realm of what we talked about mainly, which is like the mental health of students and especially in these days. What are some of the things that when you dig deep to kind of get yourself strength to help that to continue? What are some of those things?
So I do to encourage that. I guess the big thing is, telling people to trust themselves. Sometimes that intuition is the most important thing. And I don't know if we want to get into the TED Talk stuff, but I actually did a TEDx talk. It's the University of Nevada, Reno here, our local university, puts on an independent TEDx talk event every year. And I participated in that in February, talking about my own mental health journey, which I certainly bring to the table every day in a different way. I think many people, learn about their mental health struggles later in life. And so I was one of those situations for sure. And so I did a TEDx talk on postpartum depression, which I suffered from significantly, and still am suffering from really in the past couple of years since I had a child. My child's 2 now, my youngest. But that's something that I bring to the table every day. I can't separate it.
Yeah, I watched your TED Talk, and it was very inspiring to see someone share that. It was, it had like Brene Brown all over it in terms of vulnerability and opening up to sharing your own experience. But I think that's what's kind of needed to in terms of like sharing whether it's mental health or like postpartum depression that you went through. It's only through like storytelling, when you're actually sharing a story, is when people can get to understand and really feel. Because other than the label has like this, it's a loaded thing. Like, what is it? Postpartum depression or PTSD or all these different things. They can just kind of like succinctly put in an acronym. But when you share a story, then it becomes personal and people can connect with that. And so your TED Talk was really inspiring, and that's why I kind of like wanted to talk to you about that a little bit, because it's it's close to home, right? Like what happened to you, especially with your family and kids and everything, and when you survive something like that and you grow, it's not like it's never with you. Like you said, it's every day it's still with you in your life. But there's opportunity to draw strength from that. And how do you reframe your mind to kind of get that?
Yeah, the postpartum depression blindsided me. I didn't know that anyone could ever be that sick inside of their brain and be that miserable. I had never experienced anything so intense, but it brought forward for me, a whole lifetime and history of some mental illness and depression that I had never realized that's what it was. So for me, I think, because I've always been just naturally kind of an open book. Like I'm a TMI person, maybe. I always say too much information. I'm open, I share. I could be an oversharer at times. And so for me, when this happened to me, my first instinct was to share, to tell people and to ask questions like, oh my gosh, has anybody else ever had this? This is horrible. Tell me that I'm not alone here. And I wanted that so bad. And so when I started to feel better from it, I instantly wanted to do that same thing for other people and say, wait a minute, this is not, this isn't normal. And if you feel this way, it's okay to get help. And take away this stigma about getting help for that. Because when we have a cut, or we have a sore arm, we go to the doctor. When we have cancer, we get treatment. But when we have mental illness, we just hide it or we numb it, or and so I think just getting it out there and getting people to talk about it and changing sort of the picture of what it looks like. I think I exude, I'm a very bubbly, friendly, outgoing person, and I'm a really high functioning depressed person. So like, I think I can, that's how I look at it. I think the way I appear and the way I show up in the world doesn't match how I feel. And so being open about that and encouraging my staff to do that and encouraging them to get their students to do that, I think that's the most important. And hey, I don't have any kind of degree or background in mental health. I'm not a doctor. This is all coming from the heart. This is just my personal experience and how I've adapted in my leadership role.
The storytelling is I think such a therapeutic thing, whether it's like when you're talking to a mental health counselor, a therapist who can help you integrate things, just kind of talk those things out, the whole talk therapy. Of course, there's a lot of different other therapies, MDM, there's what is it, EDR, MDR?
EMDR.
EMDR, EMDR. Yeah, rapid eye movement, something like that. And of course, there are tons of different other therapies. But I think the common denominator to all of that is how we even think about mental health, right? We briefly talked about that, how we're taking care of our bodies and everything else, but like we're not as considerate of our brains, and because we think that it's a vulnerability, it's some kind of a deficiency in a way, like it's something to hide versus be like, hey, I have a cold, I'm gonna go and see a doctor. Like nobody's bragging about like, hey, I think I need to talk to someone, because like, oh, what are you, crazy? You have some issues, all those things. So I think that the stigma of that, I hope, is going to be kind of like slowly melting away. And I don't know what you see in your circles, but what are your thoughts in terms of like what can be done other than maybe spreading awareness? Is there anything else that can be done to kind of swing that pendulum the other way, to kind of remove that stigma of when people do need to get help, to darn it, get up and go and see someone and talk to them?
I think it really, it kind of lies with those who are suffering, to have that, to be brave enough, I guess, to share that. It's not for everyone, but I think talking about it is huge. I think saying more matter-of-factly, instead of like, hey, I'm going to the dentist, but hey, I'm going to go see my therapist today.
Yeah.
I try to do, I put it on my calendar at work. I don't care if someone sees it. I try to model that and say, well, my therapist told me, la, 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 because I think that people do that in the way of, hey, I got this cool new teeth whitener, but they don't talk about, hey, I got this amazing new therapist and they're helping me in this way. Just talking about it and being vulnerable. And again, that's not everybody's cup of tea. That's who I am. I'm a loudmouth. I like to talk about things and talk things out. But I think that that's the most important thing is if we can just truly talk about it, model that. And I think it's going to take people at the top doing that. Leaders have to take that approach. When celebrities come forward and say they've suffered from mental illness, that's really impactful. And some people kind of, snark at it. But, me personally, after I had postpartum depression, there's so many female celebrities that have come forward about that. I'm really interested in reading what they have to say and following that and listening to that, because they're doing a really huge service by opening up like that to the world and to the community.
Do you think that there's going to be a time where talking about this is going to be so accepted, socially, and it's going to be like the thing, like, hey, I'm on a new diet, I'm doing this, like, hey, I'm going to see a therapist or someone. Do you think there's going to be a time that we're going to finally graduate to that place?
I think we're there in some ways already. So the team, I'll just say my age, I'm almost 40, but most of the staff that work for me in the schools are much younger. They're in their mid-20s to late 20s, and they're of a different era. And I hear them and see them doing this all the time in ways that are so admirable to me. I have many times been interviewing people for jobs, and they've pointed out maybe a tattoo they have and said, oh yeah, that was from a really hard time in my life when I was suffering anxiety. And I'm like, wow, you just shared that with me, just right like that. Cool. I like that. I think that's a really different approach. I don't think that's my generation. So I don't know what you want to call it. I hate the word millennials, but that's the era that many of my staff are in. And although I think I'm secretly a millennial too, just like barely by a month, but they do have a different mentality and the things that they talk about. I'm just always like, wow, I'm proud of them because they're doing it far, far sooner than I ever did.
No, I think that's a really great point. It is going to be it's going to be a shift that's going to just bring in that more and more people will be doing it, I guess. So it's going to just become more accepted. Just like, smoking kind of went away because people are like, oh, yucky, like it's kind of like not the thing to do anymore. So I think it's going to be modeling, like you said, basically when some people who are like either in authority, they'll be like a good example of like, hey, I'm human too. And, I was listening to Alan Watts recently, and one of my favorite philosophers who's saying like, look, even the bishop is made out of 80% water. And so we are more alike than we are different. And so if you think of it that way, then you will realize that, look, I'm a human too. I have life like you, and we all we struggle, we have our ups and downs. And I think when that becomes the kind of the norm, where people are like, yeah, that's right, you're not like this some kind of, let me put you on a pedestal thing and statue. It's like, you're a person as well. And when we kind of put that down to like this common denominator, then we can talk about things, and it's going to be more and more acceptable, I feel.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that's where we're headed. And I love being part of the conversation. Anytime somebody brings up, their therapist or I'm like, let's talk more about that, and some people, it can come across self-deprecating sometimes, kind of like, oh, I'm so depressed or I'm so down, but I think it's really helpful. And I think when people can kind of take the mask off of it, defang it a little bit, I think we'll be better off.
What being a successful executive and running this organization, let's talk about a little bit about what you do, sort of like day in and day out to take care of yourself and in all respects. Like, what are some of the things that you're into to kind of recharge you, and so others who would want to follow like your path, like being an executive, someone who's a leader who's continues to grow. Some of the things that you do, like give us that kind of like insight, the window into your life that you kind of follow to kind of make yourself better and grow and be the best leader you possibly can be.
Sure. So I'm a super early riser, like 4 a.m. every day, and I can't talk or function or deal with any humans until I profusely exercise. And so I do that every day. I ran 7 miles yesterday, and I don't say that as a brag. It's literally like a necessity for me. I have to go and do that so that I can be present and function. So I don't know. I'm a very type A kind of intense person. I have met other people who feel that way. They're like, I gotta exercise before I can talk. So that's my number one. I try to get 8 hours of sleep a night. And I think I lead from the heart. I don't know. I wouldn't say that I'm any better or doing, I don't have any secret sauce, as a leader, but I definitely lead from the heart and with vulnerability, and just, those are a couple things that I bring to the table every day. My job looks super different every day. Sometimes I'm in shorts and a tank top, going through some storage closet, digging through pencils, and then the next day I'm talking to you on a podcast. So it's like every day is different. But yeah, just kind of bringing those things to the table first and foremost.
What are some of the things that you kind of found that were surprising to you in terms of like building your leadership skills?
Yeah, when I was a television reporter, I had no time for like clubs or any kind of extracurricular things like that. And so once I became an executive director, I knew like, okay, I got to start doing like some of the schmoozing and going to the events. So, prior to COVID-19, I do attend as many as I can. I kind of have learned which meetings and which public opportunities are the most important to go and just kind of have face and meet with people. I think in-person meetings are crucial. Having, relationships, those things have been really big for me. It's funny, as an extroverted, like type A person, I also have like a secret hate for networking, as you call it, showing up at a thing and like, we have 5 minutes to network, and like I hate that kind of thing. But at the same time, like a lot of times I'll go to something like that and maybe I spend 2 hours and it feels all wasted, but at the last 5 minutes I have one conversation that leads to, I don't know, a $50,000 grant, and it's like, well, it was worth it. Right. So one little moment, I would say, get out of your desk, get off your desk, get off your butt, get out there, go be in the community, and you're probably going to be a lot more successful. So
I think that's
biggest advice.
That's a great advice. I think more people need to kind of get out of their bubble. It's my wife calls it you have to lean into the awkwardness, because that's where growth happens, and it's hard, right? Because like we don't want to be in that place, but when we do and it happens and it's done, then you feel so good. You're like, oh my goodness, that was so great. It's just unbelievable. Tell me one thing about you that others may not know about you.
One thing about me that others may know. I think I lead like a double life, because I can play this role really well. I can come in and be an executive leader and be very extroverted, and I can stand up and do a TEDx talk in front of 1,000 people. I can do that. But I also have like a very strong need for a personal life and a private life. That was part of why I wanted to leave the news, was not to necessarily be on camera every day of every moment of my life. And I also have, a part of me that's just like all in Mother Earth, like barefoot mom in the park, like just want to be like a stay-at-home mom and like take care of my kids and like make baby food and like do all that. I've been there. Before I went back to the workplace and became a full-time executive director, I really did. Like, I went to story time every week with my kid. I made their Halloween costumes from scratch, sewed them, and did all that. And I really, really enjoy being a mom. And that's one thing that's been hard about being an executive director, is sacrificing all that extra time and attention and love that I'm able to give my kids. And so I feel like I could easily, be both ways. I sometimes think, if I had an opportunity, what's my dream job? It is just to 100% be a mom and focus on my kids. That's not my reality, and I love my job, so this is where I am. But I do think that's something a lot of people would never expect about me.
Being an executive director and a leader and a woman, how do you, I'd love to hear like your experiences in that space in terms of, and this is something that I'm glad that we're seeing more of, like, women's empowerment and finally kind of getting some of that kind of squared away, and women, embracing that more and more. In your role as an executive director, leader, did you find any issues that you had to deal with, and how did you deal with them and punch through those glass ceilings and things like that? Share a story if you have anything in that respect. That would be, I think, super curious to kind of hear like how you dealt with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real thing. We talked a little bit for a moment earlier about imposter syndrome. I've been in this role 4 years, and I would say the first 2 years I spent in that phase of imposter syndrome. But I also, a lot of it was reality. It wasn't just me feeling like, oh, I'm a woman and maybe I'm not taking it seriously. But I have definitely truly been in meetings where, there's 10 executive directors and 8 or 9 or 7 of them are men, and a few of us are women. And a lot of the women that are executive directors, at least in my community, are also younger. They're maybe in their 30s and 40s versus 50s and 60s, and maybe are newer to the organization or newer to the industry. And so there is sort of this good old boys mentality that's kind of like, oh, hey, we're all part of this group. And so kind of like jumping into that, it was hard in the beginning. It was like, well, aren't you cute trying to play executive director? Wasn't that adorable? Like, that was how I felt that I was being treated. Whether that was really the case, I don't know. But definitely conversations where I felt like my voice wasn't as important or as valued in the room, because maybe I'm a woman and I'm younger. And so those are both things that I definitely dealt with.
So how did you deal with that? How, for those who will be following and being inspired by what you're doing right now, share some of the tips or maybe, pro tips that how do you deal with that when you feel like you're not being listened to because you're a woman or because you're like younger?
I would say, like, don't get nasty. Don't do that, because it'll just feed into it. But for me, I always would just be like, well, that's okay. Go around you. Excuse me. Just keep on doing what is right. Again, like, lead from the heart. I try not to let those voices get me down. I try not to worry about that, and know that, hey, if you just keep doing the right thing, working really hard, oftentimes you're going to be the one that comes out on top. I find also, just personality wise, I oftentimes am the person in the room that says the thing that, like, I know everybody else is thinking it and they're all afraid to say it. And I'm like, screw it, I'm going to say it. So I'll say it. And I feel, a lot of times, oh, well, I felt that way too. And afterwards people will reach out. And so just having the courage to just do that, I think that's what's going to help, make the shift. So I'm also I've gotten more bold, it's all about relationships. My suggestion is, like, as an executive, get people's cell phone number and get on like text terms with them and be friendly, be their friend. Find out when their birthday is, bring them a birthday card, do more, go that route. And I think you'll be successful.
Very good tips. Very good tips. And I hope that this inspires whoever's listening to this, because it is great to kind of hear the insight from leaders like yourself who everybody's in that place at some point that they struggle with something, and it's the punching through something like that, and then having that, building that self-confidence and knowing, like, hey, I can do this, and the key is to have like those little tips and tricks to yourself, like, oh, here we are again. I'm in this point where something is going to happen. How do I convince myself to be bold and to have that courage to push through that? So at that uncomfortable level of, like, yeah, I'm going to speak up and I'm going to say something because it needs to be said. And I really like what you mentioned, which is lead from the heart and then focus on the mission. So it's not about you in that place. It's about, I need to say this because this will support, I think, the mission that I'm supporting, right? And then you have this kind of, oh, okay, well, I'm just a vehicle to kind of make sure that the mission of organization keeps on going forward. That's always a very good perspective. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. This is the part of the show where we just kind of wrap up and talk about, like, sort of call to action and a shout out that you want to give out to folks out there. So this is going to be your time to share whatever you want to leave the audience with, and maybe leave them with some kind of a call to action if you feel to be inspired to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say, I've got twofold. For communities and schools, visit our website, cisnevada.org. We are, truly, I believe this is a nonprofit with a mission that is a long-term solution. When I worked in different social services before at other nonprofits where we were providing food and handouts every month to the same people, I saw the reason why communities and schools is so important, which is that long-term solution, so that the children of those people standing in line for food won't need to stand in line for food in 20 years. And that truly, to me, is the most important thing for people to walk away and understand about communities and schools. And so I would say, get involved, learn more about us. We're currently collecting school supplies, masks, computers, thermometers, all kinds of items for our organization. And so I encourage people to donate, and also, hey, find out if you have a local communities and schools in your community. They may perhaps have those same services. And then from, more of a personal standpoint, I would say with just postpartum depression and mental illness in general, and I would just encourage people to just find it within yourself to just be vulnerable and be open and talk about it. And if you're having struggles, tell the people in your life that the people that you care about, that you trust, about those struggles. Get help. You can get help. You can go and see a therapist. You can be medicated. There are actual, scientific solutions to these problems, and they're very, very real. And so I just encourage people to just be open about that. Be an open book, like I am.
I love it. And that's what we're going to end with. Be an open book. I like that. The vulnerability of it, the growth, the experiences that you shared. Thank you for doing that. You've inspired me. I really appreciate what you're doing, and that organization like CIS exists and helps out. So thank you again for being on the show. And we're going to be spreading this good message around. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to The Adrian Sinclair Show. You can find previous episodes on the Apodcast multi-channel network at apodcast.com. You can also stream this podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Podbean, and other audio platforms. And if you subscribe to our weekly newsletter, you'll get convenient short summaries of podcasts you may have missed. So check it out. And lastly, please support us by sharing our episodes on social media. We really appreciate it. Thanks.